No one could get close to the billionaire's daughter until a single father working as a janitor did the unexpected. What could possibly make someone untouchable? And why would a single father be the one person who changes everything? Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. We're so glad you're here for another emotional story filled with unexpected moments and powerful human connections. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss our next story. Thank you so much for being here, watching, and supporting the channel. It truly means a lot to us. Now, let us know in the comments. What do you think could make a billionaire's daughter impossible for anyone to get close to? And with that question in mind, let's step into the beginning of this unforgettable story. Clara's scream shattered the hallway as a doctor reached through the half-open door. "Clara, let me check your pulse." "Don't come closer. You're safe here." The word safe made her recoil harder. Her shoulders struck the wall, and her bare feet slipped against the polished tile as she dragged a side table between herself and the white coat. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The room smelled of antiseptic and cold metal, while an electric floor polisher growled outside like an engine refusing to die. Two nurses waited behind the doctor. A security guard hovered near the elevator. No one crossed the threshold, yet every face remained fixed on Clara, every voice demanding something from her body. "Lower your hands, Clara. Please step back," she whispered. "We need to examine you." The doctor moved forward again. Clara clamped both palms over her ears. Her breathing turned sharp and shallow, but beneath the mechanical roar, Ethan heard something everyone else had missed. The polisher's rotating pad struck a loose strip of flooring at regular intervals. Thump, scrape, thump, and each impact made Clara's eyes snap toward the hall. Ethan released the machine's handle. The motor wound down with a falling metallic whine, and the sudden quiet exposed every small sound. Rubber saws squeaking, fabric rustling, a key ring trembling against his work belt. "Doctor," Ethan said softly, "stop moving." The doctor glanced over his shoulder. "This is a medical emergency." "Then stop making it louder." Ethan could lose his job for challenging a physician in front of staff. He knew it from the guard's stiffened posture and the nurse's warning stare. Still, he did not approach Clara. He unplugged the polisher, coiled its thick black cord, and rolled the machine backward until its wheels stopped rattling. Then he unclipped his keys. The brass teeth chimed once in his palm. Clara flinched. Ethan immediately crouched and placed the ring on the floor, several feet from her door, surrendering the only object that announced his authority over locks. "Sir, clear the hallway," the guard ordered. "In a minute." That wasn't a request. Ethan lowered himself onto the cool tile outside the room. He sat sideways, leaving the doorway open and his hands visible on his knees. He did not stare at Clara. He did not call her name. He did not offer a hand she had never asked to take. The doctor exhaled impatiently. "You're a janitor. Move." Ethan kept his gaze on a scuff mark near his boot. "She asked everyone to step back. She's disoriented." She was clear. For several seconds, nothing moved except the pale reflection of the ceiling lights across the waxed floor. The chemical scent of polish faded beneath the softer smell of laundry soap from Ethan's gray uniform. Clara's fingers slowly loosened from her ears. Her breathing remained uneven, but her eyes shifted from the doctor to the unplugged machine, then to the keys lying beyond Ethan's reach. Ethan nudged himself another inch away from the threshold. It was a small motion, almost invisible, yet Clara saw it. The table remained between her and the hallway. The nurses still waited. The guard still watched Ethan as if deciding whether to remove him. But for the first time, no one was advancing. Clara lowered one hand. Ethan stayed quiet. Then, from inside the room, came 3 faint taps against the wooden doorframe. Ethan lifted his head, but not his eyes, and listened as Clara tapped 3 times again. 3 soft knocks traveled through the wooden frame, barely louder than the fluorescent hum above the hallway. Ethan waited until the echo disappeared, then curled one knuckle against the tile beside him. Tap, tap, tap. From inside came the same answer. Clara had not made a random sound. She had begun a conversation. The doctor shifted forward, but Ethan raised one open hand without turning around. Please wait. She needs an examination. Then let her choose the distance. Cool air drifted through the ceiling vent, carrying the sharp smell of disinfectant over the fading floor polish. Beyond the table, Clara watched Ethan's hand return to his knee. No reaching. No command. No demand for eye contact. Ethan tapped twice. Clara answered twice. He tried once. One knock returned. Her breathing steadied with each exchange, as though the space between them could finally be measured in something other than footsteps. 3 meant stay there. 2 meant wait. 1 meant she had heard him. The guard's radio crackled against his belt. Sir, clear the hallway. Ethan looked down at the keys on the floor. I will if she asks. The guard took half a step closer. Clara struck the frame 3 times, harder now. Ethan did not move. That isn't defiance, he said quietly. She's telling us where the line is. Silence settled over the nurses. The doctor lowered his clipboard, its metal clip flashing beneath the white ceiling light. No one in that corridor had been waiting for Clara to establish terms. They had only been waiting for her panic to end. Clara pushed the table several inches away from the doorway. Its rubber feet dragged across the floor with a low, rough groan. Everyone stiffened. Ethan remained seated, his shoulders angled away, leaving the entire passage open. Clara placed one bare foot on the cold tile. Then she stopped. Ethan tapped once. She answered once and brought out the other foot. The hospital gown brushed her shins as she stood in the doorway, one hand gripping the frame until her knuckles blanched. The doctor whispered, Clara, may I come closer? She shook her head. This time, the doctor stepped back. The choice belonged to her, and the hallway changed with it. Clara moved forward on her own. 1 step, then another. She passed the threshold no one had crossed in months and stopped 6 feet from Ethan. He neither praised her nor reached for her. He simply slid his keys farther aside so their sudden jingle would not startle her. Clara looked at the gray uniformed janitor, then at the people who had finally obeyed her silence. Her hand lifted. 3 fingers opened between them. 3 steps, she said, her voice scraped thin from disuse. Everyone stays 3 steps away. The nurses retreated first. The doctor followed. Even the guard lowered his hand from his radio. Clara had not been brought out, coaxed out, or carried out. She had walked out because the distance was hers to control. At the far end of the corridor, a security camera turned with a faint mechanical click and fixed its dark glass eye upon Ethan and Clara. Someone else was now watching. Morning light spilled through the greenhouse roof, turning the mist on the glass into pale gold. Warm air carried the smell of damp soil and clipped rosemary, while a ventilation fan hummed above rows of sleeping orchids. Clara stopped at the entrance. Ethan was already inside, sweeping fallen leaves from the brick path with slow, even strokes. 3 steps, she said. Ethan set the broom upright and moved back until 3 slate tiles lay between them. Your distance, he replied. Your choice. Clara entered without an escort. The doctor waited beyond the glass doors, and the nurses remained in the hallway, their white shoes motionless against the polished floor. Ethan did not ask Clara to sit. He turned a wooden bench slightly, so it faced the plants instead of the security camera in the corner, then returned to gathering leaves. Clara traced the bench with 2 fingers before lowering herself onto its cool slats. For several seconds, only the broom whispered across brick. Why don't you ask questions? She said. Because you haven't invited one. Her eyes shifted to the second broom leaning against a potting table. May I? Ethan asked. Clara answered with 3 taps against the bench. He picked up the broom by its worn wooden handle, placed it halfway between them, and stepped back. No hand reached for hers. No instruction followed. Clara stood, crossed the space herself, and wrapped her fingers around the handle. Together, but never closer than she allowed, they swept a narrow path through the fallen leaves. Above them, the camera's red light blinked. By noon, the footage was playing on a wall-sized screen 30 floors above the city. The Whitmore boardroom smelled of black coffee and new leather. Rain pressed silver lines against the windows as 12 directors watched Clara sit beside a janitor, take a broom from him, and remain outside her room for 17 minutes. He had no authorization. He gave her an object. He isolated her from clinical supervision. Ethan stood at the far end of the table in his gray uniform, his hands empty at his sides. A director froze the image where Clara's fingers touched the broom handle. You crossed a professional boundary. No, Ethan said quietly. She established one. I obeyed it. The door opened before anyone could answer. Richard Whitmore entered beneath the cold white ceiling lights, carrying the stillness of a man accustomed to owning every room he entered. His gaze settled on the screen, then on Ethan's scuffed work shoes. Leave us. The directors filed out. Even the air conditioning seemed louder after the door closed. Richard approached until only the table separated them. My daughter would not let physicians near her, he said. Yet she followed you into a greenhouse. She didn't follow me. Ethan met his eyes without raising his voice. She chose to go. Richard placed both palms on the glossy table. His wedding ring struck the wood with a hard click. Men have used my family's pain to reach my money before. Then you should understand why I never asked her for anything. Richard pressed a button, replaying the moment Clara took the broom. On screen, she appeared calm beside the janitor no one had authorized her to trust. Stay away from Clara, he said. That is not a request. Ethan glanced at the frozen image. If she asks me to leave, I will. Richard's jaw tightened. And if I ask? Then you're asking me to ignore her answer. The billionaire reached for the phone and summoned security, but before the line connected, the boardroom doors opened again. Clara stood on the threshold, exactly 3 steps from her father, and lifted 3 fingers between them. For the first time, Richard Whitmore was the one being told how close he was allowed to come. The snap of a plastic badge clip cut through the boardroom's refrigerated air. A security guard stepped toward Ethan while fluorescent light trembled across the glossy table. Mr. Cole, surrender your keys. Am I being fired? Suspended, effective immediately. Ethan unhooked the ring from his belt. The same keys he had placed on the floor for Clara now landed in the guard's palm with a muted metallic weight. Across the room, Clara kept 3 fingers raised. Richard did not move closer, but he did not look at her either. This is an administrative decision, he said. Your presence has become disruptive. Ethan glanced toward Clara, then lowered his voice. You made your boundary clear. Keep it. He walked out without touching her, without asking her to defend him, and without surrendering the quiet dignity that had brought her through the locked door. In the service corridor, the air smelled of bleach and warm dust. The floor polisher stood against the wall, its cord wrapped exactly as Ethan had left it. A hospital administrator waited beside it with a white envelope. Your wages stopped today, she said. Benefits remain active through Friday pending review. Friday. Ethan's thumb pressed into the envelope until the paper creased. Lucy's specialist appointment was Monday, and the insurance card in his wallet was the only reason the visit would cost $40 instead of more than he earned in a month. His phone vibrated. A reminder glowed on the screen. Lucy, prescription refill. He silenced it before anyone could hear. Can I appeal? You can submit a statement. Will it protect my daughter's coverage? The administrator's eyes dropped to the polished floor. Not after Friday. Behind the therapy wing's frosted glass, the doctor waited beside Clara's open doorway. The nurses remained in the hallway, leaving the 3-step distance untouched. Richard stood farther back, his suit sharp against the pale walls, holding out a tablet as if a signature could restore order. Clara looked from the screen to the empty stretch of corridor where Ethan should have been. Then she stepped out. No prompting, no hand guiding her. The rubber soles of her shoes whispered over the waxed floor as she passed the doctor, while every nurse resisted the instinct to close the space around her. Richard lifted the tablet. Clara, go back inside. She continued toward the glass partition overlooking the service corridor. There, Ethan was folding his suspension notice beside the silent machine. Clara raised one palm. The security guard moved to block her path. Miss Whitmore, you need to return to treatment. One finger rose. Stop. A second pointed to the floor 3 steps away. Distance. The third touched her own chest. Her choice. The guard looked toward Richard, but Clara did not. She took a black dry erase marker from the therapy card, uncapped it, and pressed the tip against the glass. It squeaked sharply in the sterile quiet. Her hand shook on the first word, steadied on the second, then carved the final sentence in letters large enough for the boardroom cameras to capture. He asked permission. You never did. Ethan saw the message through the glass. Richard saw it reflected across his own face. No one spoke. The man with billions could restore Ethan's job with one call, but Clara had just made the price of that call unmistakable. Richard would have to admit that the janitor he distrusted had given his daughter something her own father had not. By Friday, Ethan would lose Lucy's insurance, and every hour Richard remained silent would become an answer Clara could no longer ignore. Cold blue light spilled across the conference table, catching on the silver clip of a transfer packet as Richard Whitmore pushed it forward. The ventilation system hummed overhead, carrying the sharp smell of toner and hospital disinfectant through the sealed room. Clara stood 3 steps away, her black marker still clenched between 2 pale fingers. Sign it. No, Clara, listen to me. Richard tapped the signature line. A private facility in Connecticut has agreed to admit you tonight. No cameras. No board. No more janitors interfering with your treatment. The paper whispered against polished walnut. Beyond the glass wall, the doctor and nurses waited without approaching. The security guard remained near the elevator, Ethan's confiscated keys hanging from his belt. Richard softened his voice, but not his grip on the pen. If you cooperate, Ethan will be reinstated before Friday. Full wages. Full benefits. His daughter will keep her specialist appointment. At Lucy's mention, Clara's eyes moved to the packet. Richard noticed. One signature, he said. You go somewhere safe, and his little girl gets what she needs. For several seconds, only the fluorescent lights buzzed. Clara touched her chest, then raised 3 fingers. My choice. This is not a choice, she said, each word rough from disuse. It is, Richard replied. It's the responsible one. Clara took the pen. Richard released a breath and turned the transfer packet toward her. The nib hovered above the line, trembling hard enough to leave a dot of black ink. Then Clara drew a single stroke through the signature box. No, Richard's hand flattened against the table. If you refuse, Ethan stays suspended. Then you suspended him, Clara said. Not me. The words landed without volume, yet the doctor lowered his eyes. Richard stepped forward. Clara struck the glass 3 times with the pen. Tap, tap, tap. The security guard instinctively moved, but she held up 3 fingers, and he stopped. Richard remained inside the boundary, close enough that the scent of his cedar cologne reached her. Clara backed away until her shoulder met the cold glass. You are not well enough to make this decision, he said. Instead of retreating, Clara turned toward the wall-mounted intercom connected to the boardroom. Her thumb hovered over the call button. I want to speak. You already made your statement. Not through glass. She pressed the button. A soft chime sounded in the adjoining room, and shadowed figures shifted behind the privacy screen. Clara, Richard warned. Once you appear before the board, everything becomes public record. Your condition, your behavior, Ethan's involvement. You cannot take it back. The transfer packet offered privacy, Ethan's job, and Lucy's medical coverage. Testifying could cost Clara the last shelter her father's name still provided, and it could leave Ethan exposed to accusations he had refused to answer through her. Clara slid the packet back across the table. Tomorrow, 10 o'clock. Richard reached for the intercom, but Clara kept her palm over it. I will testify myself. The board secretary's voice crackled through the speaker. Ms. Whitmore, are you formally requesting an emergency hearing? Clara looked past her father to the dark conference room beyond the glass. Her hand still shook, but her answer did not. Yes. A red indicator illuminated above the door, confirming the session had been entered into the board's official calendar. Richard could no longer move her quietly before anyone heard her. Clara placed the pen beside the unsigned papers and stepped away on her own terms. By morning, the board would have to decide whether the billionaire's daughter was competent enough to speak, or whether respecting her voice had become more dangerous than silencing it. The resignation letter slid from the hospital administrator's printer with a dry mechanical whisper. Warm toner mixed with the smell of stale coffee in the basement office, where fluorescent tubes buzzed above cinder block walls. Ethan signed at the bottom and pushed the paper across the scratched laminate desk. Effective immediately. The administrator studied him. Your suspension is temporary. Clara's hearing isn't. If you resign, there's no appeal. Ethan removed his janitor identification badge and laid it beside the pen. Its plastic edge was worn smooth from years of opening supply rooms before dawn. Then there's nothing left to hold over her. The administrator lowered his voice. Your wages are already frozen. Resigning could end any chance of reinstating your benefits. Lucy's specialist appointment is Monday. Ethan's thumb rested against the pale indentation where his badge clip had pressed into his shirt. From the corridor came the rattle of a laundry cart and the hiss of steam pipes behind the wall. My daughter needs that appointment, he said. But Clara cannot spend tomorrow proving I deserve a paycheck. She deserves to speak for herself. The administrator did not touch the letter. Richard Whitmore's attorneys will say you abandoned her. I was never assigned to her. Ethan stood. That was the point. Upstairs, the evening halls had gone quiet. Amber security lights stretched across the polished floor, and the greenhouse glass held the last gray wash of sunset. Ethan carried a cardboard box containing his thermos, Lucy's crayon drawing, and a small battery-powered lamp he had once used while cleaning during power tests. At Clara's doorway, the doctor waited outside rather than entering. Two nurses remained farther down the hall, leaving the three-step distance Clara had established. Ethan stopped beyond it. Clara sat inside with the unsigned transfer packet on the table. Her fingers tightened when she saw the box. They fired you? No, he set the lamp on the floor between them, but did not cross the threshold. I resigned. Clara rose so quickly that the chair legs scraped tile. Because of me? Because they were making you responsible for me. I can testify. You should. I can make them restore everything. Ethan shook his head once. Then tomorrow becomes about saving my job instead of telling your truth. The lamp cast a soft circle across the threshold, warming the steel door frame and the folded note beneath it. Clara approached until 3 steps remained. Ethan stayed where he was. Ask me to stay, he said, and they'll use that request against you. Ask me to leave, and they'll call it proof that you're unstable. I won't let them turn your voice into either weapon. He picked up the box. So this choice is mine. Clara crouched after he had moved away and unfolded the note. The paper trembled faintly beneath her fingertips. No one has the right to enter your silence unless you open the door. When she looked up, Ethan was already walking toward the elevator, his work shoes making soft, measured sounds against the waxed floor. He did not turn around. Behind him, Clara lifted the lamp and placed it inside her room with her own hands. The elevator doors closed on his final shift, and the hearing scheduled for 10 o'clock now had no janitor left to protect. Only a woman who would have to decide what she was willing to say when every powerful person in the room wanted her silent. The hearing room's ceiling vents whispered over polished walnut, while the small lamp on Clara's table cast a warm amber circle against the cold blue glare of the monitors. Nurses waited down the hallway. The doctor remained outside the open doors. Even the security guard stopped 3 paces away when Clara raised 3 fingers. Stay there. Yes, ma'am. Close the doors. Richard Whitmore's attorneys exchanged glances as the heavy panels met with a muted click. Clara did not sit beside her father. She placed the phone beneath the microphone, its glass screen chipped at one corner, then rested Ethan's note beside it. Richard leaned forward. Clara, whatever you think you remember. She lifted one finger. He stopped, but the leather beneath his hands creaked. Months earlier, voices had entered every room before Clara was ready. Physicians asking questions, executives offering explanations, her father deciding what she could endure. Ethan had done something far less dramatic. He had stayed outside. He had asked. He had accepted no. Now Clara touched the screen. Static filled the speakers, followed by Richard's recorded voice, low and unmistakable. The Whitmore access system failed before the abduction. If the police learn the kidnappers used an active company credential, every contract is exposed. Another man asked whether Clara had been told. Richard answered, not until legal contains it. She cannot handle this. The ventilation hum suddenly seemed enormous. A board member removed his glasses. The hospital administrator stared at the waveform trembling across the monitor. Richard reached toward the phone. Clara covered it with her palm. 3 steps. His hand remained suspended over the table before slowly withdrawing. The recording continued. Whitmore Security had received repeated warnings that inactive credentials were not being properly disabled. The alert connected to Clara's abduction had been buried to protect the company from liability, and Richard had approved the silence. There was no elaborate conspiracy to explain, only a failed safeguard, a concealed warning, and a father who had chosen corporate control over his daughter's right to know. "You stole this," Richard said. "No," Clara's voice scraped at first, then steadied. "I kept it." She turned toward the board. The lamp's glow caught the fine tremor in her fingers, but she did not hide them. "I wasn't refusing treatment. I was refusing people who entered after I said no." One attorney shifted his papers. "Are you claiming the janitor cured you?" "No." Clara looked at the empty chair near the wall, where Ethan would never again wait for wages, benefits, or permission to matter. Ethan cured nothing. He believed one word. She placed 3 fingertips on the tabletop. "No." Then she played the final seconds. Richard's voice returned through the speakers. "Keep her isolated until she stops asking about the access logs." The doctor lowered his eyes. The security guard stepped back without being told. Across the walnut table, authority changed hands without a shout, a threat, or a touch. Clara slid the phone toward the board chair. "Enter the complete recording into the record." Richard rose. "If you do this, you will lose everything tied to my name." Clara switched off the lamp, leaving the room beneath its hard, institutional light. "Then tomorrow," she said, "we decide what your name is worth." The board chair locked the phone inside an evidence case, and outside the sealed doors, corporate counsel was already calling for an emergency vote. Whether Clara would remain protected by the Whitmore fortune or stand against it would be decided at 9 the next morning. At 9 o'clock, the brass hands of the boardroom clock aligned with a soft mechanical click. Rain traced the windows in silver threads, and the evidence case sat unopened beneath the cold white lights. Clara entered carrying 2 folders and Ethan's small lamp. Richard's attorneys occupied one side of the walnut table. The hospital administrator sat near the opposite wall, hands folded beside a legal pad. Clara placed the lamp down, but did not switch it on. "Withdraw the recording," Richard said. "Sign the transfer agreement." "No." "Then you leave with nothing." The rain whispered against the glass. Leather chairs creaked as board members shifted, waiting for the billionaire's daughter to retreat from the edge of his fortune. Instead, Clara opened the first folder. "This is my irrevocable disclaimer of the conditional Whitmore inheritance." Richard's attorney leaned forward. "Once executed, it cannot be reversed." Clara signed. The scratch of her pen sounded louder than the storm. Richard stared at the signature, then at the daughter he had once confined behind guarded doors. "You're surrendering the estate, the voting shares, and every protection attached to them." "They were never protections," Clara said. "They were permissions you could revoke." She pushed the document toward corporate counsel. A board member verified the signature, pressed a seal into the paper, and recorded the surrender at 9:07 a.m. The fortune Richard had used as a leash no longer reached her. Clara opened the second folder. Years earlier, an independent trust had been established beyond Richard's corporate control. Its trustees had confirmed overnight that, once Clara rejected the conditional inheritance, she could assume direct authority over its charitable assets. She signed the acceptance documents and slid a written resolution across the table. "I am directing the trust to fund an independent investigation into Whitmore corporate security, including the buried warnings, the active credentials, and every order concerning my isolation." "You will destroy this company," Richard said. "No," Clara replied. "The truth will decide what survives." The hospital administrator received the next document. It established a recovery center built around informed consent, 3-step boundaries, permission before contact, quiet rooms without forced entry, and patients empowered to stop any interaction without punishment. Richard gave a dry laugh. "And the janitor? How much will you offer him to come back?" Clara's fingers rested beside the unlit lamp. "Nothing." The room stilled. Ethan resigned so my voice could not be traded for his job, his insurance, or Lucy's care. If I attach money to his return, I turn respect into another transaction. She authorized the center, but left its first staff position blank. No contract, no secret payment, no messenger dispatched to corner him. Only a sealed envelope addressed to Ethan, containing an invitation he could refuse without consequence. When the meeting ended, Clara carried the envelope herself to the hospital's outgoing mail tray. The paper felt rough beneath her thumb. Somewhere down the corridor, a floor machine began its low, familiar hum. She released the envelope and stepped back 3 paces. By noon, the investigation order would reach outside counsel. Richard's control over her future would be permanently broken, and the center would exist on paper. But Ethan's insurance had ended Friday, Lucy's specialist appointment was Monday, and Clara had chosen not to purchase the one answer money could force. For the first time, the next door would have to be opened by Ethan. Rain tapped the apartment window before dawn, and the refrigerator clicked into silence beside a stack of unpaid bills. On the kitchen table, Ethan's phone glowed with the hospital portal. Lucy's specialist appointment remained scheduled for Monday, but the insurance field now read inactive. Lucy slept beneath a faded quilt on the couch, one small hand curled around the edge of his old janitor's jacket. Then 3 measured knocks sounded at the door. Ethan opened it to find the hospital administrator standing alone beneath the yellow hallway light, holding Clara's sealed envelope and a folder. "No one sent me to persuade you," the administrator said. "This invitation has no conditions." Ethan read it once. The recovery center offered him a paid position designing patient spaces and training staff in consent-based boundaries. Beneath the formal language, Clara had added only 3 handwritten words: "You may refuse." "Is this charity?" Ethan asked. "No." "Did Clara fund my insurance?" "She specifically forbade it." The radiator hissed, warming the room with the metallic smell of old pipes. Ethan looked toward Lucy, then signed nothing. Instead, he took the invitation and closed the door gently. Monday morning brought cold white sunlight across the specialist clinic floor. Ethan arrived with Lucy and an envelope containing the last of his savings. At the billing desk, he placed his debit card on the counter. "Run it," he said. The payment emptied the account, but the appointment remained his decision, not a debt disguised as mercy. Afterward, Lucy walked beside him into the new recovery center, where fresh paint mingled with the scent of cedar and coffee. Clara waited inside the entrance, not blocking it. The doctor stood near the hearing room doors, while the nurses remained down the hallway. A security guard approached, stopped when Clara raised 3 fingers, and backed away 3 full steps. The hospital administrator held the center's founding document, but left the first employment line blank. Ethan stopped at the threshold. Clara did not reach for him. "You don't owe me a yes," she said. "I know, and I won't pay for gratitude." "I know that too." For several seconds, only the soft hum of the little lamp filled the lobby. Clara had placed it on a low table beside an empty chair, its amber light touching the unsigned contract without hiding the blank space beneath it. Ethan turned to Lucy. "Your choice," he said. Lucy studied Clara, then gave 3 gentle taps against the wooden doorframe. Clara answered with 3 taps of her own. Lucy stepped inside first. This time Ethan followed, not because a billionaire's daughter needed saving, and not because a single father had been purchased, but because both had been given room to choose. He signed the document, adding one condition: every employee, donor, physician, and parent would obey the same right to refuse. Clara signed beneath him. The administrator accepted the founding document. The doctor lowered his eyes in quiet respect, and the nurses let the silence remain unbroken. Weeks later, Lucy's care continued through Ethan's earned benefits. The outside investigation moved forward, and Richard Whitmore faced consequences money could no longer erase. Yet the truest reversal stood at the center's front door, where Clara greeted each frightened patient from 3 steps away, and Ethan kept the lamp burning beside her. Everyone else had tried to reach Clara by crossing her boundaries. Ethan reached her by honoring the door, and when she finally opened it, they walked through together.